Redefining masculinity. That is what we are going to jump into today with my guest, Dave Rossi. Dave, welcome to the Interstate.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here, Bridget. Nice to meet you.
So, you are a published author, contractor, you build beautiful custom homes, but you're very passionate about conscious leadership, redefining masculinity, and creating an impact. What does this mean to you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Right out of the gate. Let's just go right into it. I ran a successful commercial construction business initially, married 3 kids, 2 buildings, 4 houses, loads of cars, the whole thing. And I realized that I was miserable. I was overweight. I was on high blood pressure medication. I had a pending back surgery. And what this means to me is when I basically collapsed and hit rock bottom, I learned a lot. And I just wanted to get what I learned out to people because I was almost mad that I didn't know these things existed, having been educated and raised in a successful family of lawyers and overachievers. And I'm like, how do I fail so spectacularly when I try so hard not to? And so I'm really passionate about helping others mainly. And I've learned these things. I just imagine there's so many people that don't have the information that I had when I was 46. And so I just kind of want to get it out there. And that's my passion.
And it's led you to writing. So you wrote a book called The Imperative Habit and one that is called Alphas Die Young, which that caught my attention straight out of the gate. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Alphas die early.
Young does ring off the tongue better, but yes, alphas die early.
Alphas die early. And that caught my attention right away. So in wanting to share this message, you start writing. Tell us a little bit about this. If you don't mind, let's start with the alphas die early. What do you mean by that?
Well, I realized that for a lot of people, for a lot of men, I have 2 boys and a daughter, I learned what I learned in terms of self-mastery, the spiritual lessons that I've learned. And I say spiritual, and I want to use that word in a very simplistic way. Imagine if you're exercising and you're running and your legs are tired and your body's releasing lactic acid and your brain's receiving that data and your heart is pounding and your cheeks are flush and you're hot and all this feedback into your mind. And then your body says, stop working out so hard. And then something else says, no, keep going. That's to me a spiritual behavior is when you do something beyond this feedback. And I learned that feedback came in with fear and stress and anger and jealousy and worry and doubt and self-esteem. And so I really wanted to take these spiritual practices and give them to men who are struggling, men like me who are struggling. And also what I wanted to do is let people know how difficult the problem is for masculinity. And you see the news today, you see the trends of young men, you see the masculinity crisis. So I really wanted to provide a framework of the problem, how society, how media, how politics, how our biology, and how social media and the internet really affects masculinity as a whole and culturally. And then how do we apply self-mastery, sovereignty, coherence as solutions for whether we want to get in shape, whether we want to make a lot of money, or whether we want to fall in love. And they're the same principles applied with different disciplines. And that's kind of why I just dove into this.
What has the response been so far?
Well, people in general absolutely completely love the message. They love it because it's practical, because they see the problem. Similar to me, when I had my crash in 2016, I contextualized it. I didn't think I had problems because I didn't think answers existed. So if no answer existed, I didn't have a problem. Like, I'm fine. Like, I feel anxiety, but that's normal. We all have anxiety when we own a business. But really, it was undue anxiety that I didn't really need to have. It was performance anxiety. It was, success-driven anxiety. It was anxiety driven from what society told me I had to do to be a man, and that's identity-driven performance. And it really wasn't performance driven by the love of what I was doing or the passion to be in the job that I was in. And so the response has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of what it does for people. One of my employees now is a 24-year-old guy from university, and I would give him chapters if they read it, and he would come back, when's the next chapter coming out? Like, I want to see the next chapter. So he was a great bellwether. He's 24 years old and really got a lot out of it. So it's been fantastic, and I couldn't be more pleased.
Have you created a community outside of the book?
Oh, not yet. Yeah, not yet. I would love to do that. A lot of informal community, I do respond to a lot of DMs and a lot of requests and emails. I do a lot of podcasts. I get out there, I speak. I'm helping some of the larger thought leaders with some of this 360 ideas of the spiritual behaviors that I talked about in a very pragmatic, practical way. How do you use self-mastery and sovereignty for, depression or to make more money in
Right.
business? Or how do you deal with a relationship? How do you manage these emotions and these feelings? And this is also feedback. We forget that lactic acid from our legs is a signal to do something. And fear in our brain is a signal to do something, or low self-esteem. And so the question is, how do you deal with that? And what are the mechanisms that you have available to you to break those cycles and make progress for your life? That's kind of what it's all about.
When you look back on that in 2016, when you had your collapse, what do you think was like the lead domino? What fell out first?
Well, there are probably many. I remember some of the many, but the real like just domino falling that like hit the floor and like vibrated the whole house was a Leo Tolstoy book called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I wasn't until then. Ivan was a judge in 1800s Russia, and he wanted to be a musician. So he spent his whole life wishing he did made music, something creative, but he was in the law, which was very prestigious. His family pushed him, his kids pushed him, everyone pushed him, and he was dying. That's the title of The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And on his
Mhm.
deathbed, he looked up at his family and he said, nail this because it hit me like literally a bazooka in the face. What if I lived my entire life wrong? And
Right.
that hit me. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong business with the wrong women and the wrong marriage. And I'm not me. And I've given up so many facets of who I truly am authentically to meet these demands in Silicon Valley entrepreneurship and success and the zip code I lived in. And then I'll never forget the phrase, don't fear the outcome. And I was afraid to leave. I was afraid of the outcome of what I would lose, my house, my business, 50% time with my kids. So that was those were two really major things, the death of Ivan Illich and don't fear the outcome. And I think a lot of people probably live in a bit of quiet desperation, not
Yes.
knowing how happy they can be. And they don't know how unhappy they are because they don't know what the inverse looks like. I didn't. And I think people would have considered me a really happy person,
Mhm.
generally speaking, but I got it. It's like a 2 out of 10 where I am now, what I know now in terms of what I gave up to be where I am now.
I am confident there's a lot of people that can relate to this right away,
Yeah.
and that are, as you said, they're either in quiet desperation or they feel as if this is all there is.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think people run into is they don't want necessarily to hurt others to claim happiness for themselves. How much of a role do you think that plays in a lot of people's acceptance of quiet desperation?
It's a big part of it, and I think you're right on with that. I think first off, successful people are very difficult to change because the world rewards you with your report card, and that was me for a long time. Why would I change if I have a beautiful house and a business and all these things? There's really no reason to change when I'm winning, right? But
Right. Right.
winning doesn't necessarily equate to happiness.
Right.
And your brain doesn't really care if you're happy. Your brain just wants you to survive. And so I think to follow up with your question, I didn't want to upset other people because my identity in terms of being loved as a child was about conforming. We're all conformists to some degree. We all wear a mask of conformity. The way we dress is conformity. And I think it's okay. There is a card to punch in society for conformity, but it's when that card crosses into emotion, like the emotion of necessity or the emotion of I'm not whole or the emotion of self-esteem or valuation. The second it begins to play with those emotional obstacles is when hurting other people and conformity kind of collapses. So, when I left, I had to split my kids 50-50, and I'd say to my older children, 18, 19, hey, what are you going to do for a holiday? Oh, maybe go with mom, maybe go with you. And say, look, whatever you do, you're going to upset somebody. So do it. Like you can't make everybody happy. So please do not worry about upsetting me. Even if I sound upset, it's a lesson you learning that to get what you want, you're going to have to hurt somebody. You can't live your life if you're afraid of hurting somebody. And also you learn that if someone else upset isn't your responsibility. And that goes kind of counter to I chose mom over you. So I'm responsible. No, I'm responsible for my own feelings. I'm accountable. That's what being sovereign is I learn to deal with my own feelings, and my disappointment comes from an expectation or belief, not necessarily reality. So that's on me to figure out how to deal with that sadness, not you. You're living your life. Can't blame you for living your life. And I think that's a really important distinction that people need to learn, that it's your life. And every day you're living the wrong life is one day you're not living the right life. And I learned
The
that with
right life,
Ivan
right.
Illich. So when I learned that, I'm like, every day I don't act authentically what I really want. And I don't mean hedonistic. And I don't mean, you know, hurting people intentionally. I mean, if my life is I'm going to go on vacation without my kids, I'm sorry you're going to not go on this trip. Sorry if you're upset. This is my life. This is what I'm doing. And I
Mhm.
think people need to get used to that kind of brash support of your own life and your own objectives.
Do you feel like in today's society that some people are carrying what you just described to extremes? We have such a huge epidemic of no contact culture and familial estrangements. It almost seems to me like there's a connection there of some people are taking what you just described and they're leaving out the element of consideration. Now, by the way, there are some instances where that is it's a great thing, but it just with the epidemic rate that it's happening. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if people are societally, is the pendulum going a little too far as people are experimenting with this? And do you think it could come back someplace more with more moderation?
Well, that's a a conformance perspective already, right? Because
Hmm.
that's saying, hey, how far does a pendulum have to swing before we don't conform anymore? And so I'm kind of like a no conformance person, but self-regulation, self-modulation, self-morality, I call it objective morality versus subjective morality. I think what you describe is a bit of subjective morality. Hey, might have violated some morality, but everybody else is doing it, so it's kind of okay, right? The pendulum swing this far and I'm within that range, so I can be unmoralistic. So I kind of like, and what I'm really passionate about with Alpha's Diary and the path of the Omega is saying, no, 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 no. I don't care what the pendulum's doing. I don't care what culture's doing. I'm not going to walk the cultural perspective. I'm going to do what's right for me without emotion, without this, I need this perspective. Right. And
Hmm.
I think there's a very tiny nuance of what is spiritually moralistic objectively and what is subjective morals. And I think when you know, I don't really look at culture. I agree with you and I do see it, but I don't play that same standard. And I think it just gives people leeway to fudge and to hijack something that's kind of good and kind of sovereign into something that's been hijacked by ego or identity that you can play with and use and say, oh, sorry, later, everyone's doing it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes,
And
it
there's a
does.
nuance. It's a very tiny
It
nuance.
is nuanced.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's hard to walk. And the reason why what I say about nuance is when emotion crosses over. Like for example, desire is fear. What are you talking about? All manifestation is desire to manifest spiritually. You need to have desire. Well, that's true, but the second it's needed and your identity is required for it, that little path and that little crossover is going to be different for everybody. The second you think you need that desire to be whole is the second it's no longer passion and appropriate desire. It crosses fear. Because then you said I need it to be whole. It's a fear-based desire, not a
Right.
healthy-based desire. And that's the nuance I'm talking about.
That's really interesting. And I want to reflect on that further. I think that is very insightful.
And that's, I can tell you from personal experience that we walk that line of lying to ourselves about what that is. And I think that rationalization is a very powerful guide in the direction of fear, in the direction of authenticity. And I think that's where you practice is you keep assessing and being self-aware about the decision-making process that took you to desire based on fear for wholeness or necessity, or desire based on authenticity and I don't need it. I could take it or leave it. And anyone on the manifesting side, on the more sophisticated side, will tell you that you have to be content, happy, and abundant. And these are just good properties
Right.
in general, but it's more so, and it can be very colloquial and very woo-woo, this whole, be abundant and be content. But there is a science to this from a mental perspective. When you're sovereign and you're content, the energy that you produce emotionally, consciously, from a consciousness perspective is very, very different. And people can sense that. The world can
They
sense
sense
that.
it.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is that whole when you walk in the room, the energy that you have walks in before you, around you, and behind you. And anyone who wants to deny that, we could have a very long conversation with no end because it's true. And people instinctually pick up on it.
Yeah, and I think there's, obviously there's three levels of energy. There's the I have energy, I can go run a race. I slept well, I ate well, I have energy, ATP and the crib cycle and all that kind of fitness stuff. And then there's the emotion. Like emotions are
Hmm.
transferred through our neural pathways, through our nerves or electrical. There's neurotransmitters or chemical, and it leaves an emotional trace. Somebody who's temporarily upset, you can feel that energy, and someone who's temporarily upset. And these emotions are transient, and they get triggered from our beliefs and our comparison of stimulus and beliefs, and it's a very standard psychological process. And then there's our consciousness level as a human being, where we're stripped of emotion, there's still a toroidal field that we emit. Heart math talks
Yes.
about this. Dr. David Hawkins has done a lot of research on this, power versus force and his levels of consciousness. And so those three levels. And so when you walk into a room, you know, you can kind of muddle your consciousness level with your emotional state, but you can change those. Actually, you can change both. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's where the line gets driven.
So tell me more about this redefining masculinity. You mentioned briefly the Omega path. How does that tie in with redefining masculinity?
Well, good question. And I think this is helpful for women as well to understand men. As a biological Darwinian DNA mammal, we want to be an alpha. That's just an animalistic mammalian trait. That's driven inside of us. We can't stop that. However, to have self-mastery is to act beyond feedback. And so if I have this propensity to be an 800-pound gorilla, and it's not good for me, then I should have the ability and self-mastery to say, I'm not going to act that way. I'm not going to behave like an animal. And so in modern times, what is an 800-pound gorilla is very confusing today. Is it abs? Is it money? Is it a good job? Is it a medium job? Is it a combination of both? Is it 6'2" but no money? Or is it 6 foot with a lot of money? Is it, and also I talk a lot about how that definition of the 800-pound gorilla changes from circle to circle, region to region. And so I always say, men peacock, right? And so we wear this mask of feathers and we want people to pick us on our feathers. And that's the mask. It's the alpha mask. It's the masculinity mask. It's the mask of success in that circle. It's the words and behaviors that I think will give me success from a job or for love. And all I'm really doing is looking at my feathers and thinking, maybe I need some different feathers. And you color my feathers.
Right.
And no. I think this girl likes an emotional guy. Let me write some emotional colors over here to show that I'm emotionally accessible, even though I'm not. Let me act like I am, right? So we have this mask and people are picking the feathers and not the bird. And so this is not sustainable. It's misaligned and it's misrepresentational. And so the Omega is someone that just yanks the feathers out and says, here I am, I'm the bird, forget the feathers. There's no feathers. I'm not going to draw them in. I'm not going to pretend. And the Omega is the last. So it's the last mask. It's no mask. It's stripping the masculinity of a mammalian person and say, I'm not even going to act like a biological unit anymore. I'm going to act more spiritual and more civilized. It's civilized at the highest level, moving more and more away from an animalistic behavior and more to a civilized behavior, which is the way Homo sapiens have been going for the last 10,000 years. Let's keep going. When you see so many urges as an animal for food, destroys our diets and, amorous that
Right.
drives our love. And let me, as an animal, let me hedge my bets on which is going to work out for me, right? It's not authentic. It's not sustainable. It's not fair. It hurts ourselves, although we think it saves us because the animal in us says it saves us. And even for work, we misrepresent our skills and deals and resumes and things like that. And so, the Omega path is really about learning what it means to be sovereign, learning the techniques to have self-mastery and the wonderful rewards that do come with it, even though it's contrary to most animalistic behaviors.
Well, so if someone is out there and they immediately thought of that they're peacocking and they have the feathers and they know and they hear us and they're like, I know my daily life could be different and I don't know how to get there. Do you have a first small step someone could take? What's an
Oh, definitely.
action?
Yeah, definitely. I go over what I call the basics. So if you're a soccer player, running is a basic. You kind of have to be a good runner. And if you're a water polo player or a diver, swimming is kind of like a basic. Swimming you kind of have to do. If you're a hockey player, skating's basic. These are basic things. For this type of work, there are a lot of more detailed techniques, but the basics are things like awareness. And you really kind of need to, and when I say about awareness is, I always ask people, oh yeah, be aware. And that means be aware of like your surroundings. Okay, so I'm in a room. What else am I aware of? And it really is awareness of emotion. It's an awareness of what you're feeling as a human. And when you can stop and be aware, the first thing you realize is I'm doing this. If you can't be aware, you can't realize that you're about to peacock, right? And throw your feathers up and maybe color feathers in. And so that's kind of the first step. And there are very few techniques to teach about awareness besides really wanting a better life for yourself. And that will pull awareness in. And it does take time. Vulnerability is another one. If you can't be vulnerable, you can't be honest with yourself. You can't change the direction of rationalization if you can't just accept objective behavior or objective reality for what it is and say, I screwed up. If you can't do that or be vulnerable to share that emotion. And I think vulnerability is a very interesting thing because obviously Brene Brown's talked a lot about vulnerability. And
Yes.
for me, vulnerability goes against DNA because it's a defenseless position. So as an animal, we don't want to be defenseless. It goes against what society says is strong. Everyone considers vulnerability as a weakness. And as a man, you're never told to be vulnerable. So you have these three benchmarks to say, do not do this. And yet it takes the most amount of strength to be vulnerable. In fact, it's stronger to admit your emotions than it is to ignore them. To hide is not strong. And so I think those are kind of the first steps in doing this. And if you can do those two things, if you can be vulnerable, you can begin to be authentic. And authentic is stripping the mask. Authenticity is like pulling the feathers out. Say, look, I'm not going to pretend in any capacity. I'm not going to affect. If I got 7th place in a race and it took me 2 hours and 10 minutes, I'm not going to say 2 hours. I'm going to say 2 hours and 10 minutes because it reflects on accuracy. If you need to fudge the size of the fish you caught, you're doing it for a reason. And that reason is not authentic. And that reason was causing your problems, not that you fudged a half a pound on a fish you caught, right? And so I think that accuracy goes to the mechanism of authenticity, vulnerability, and awareness.
You mentioned that you have 2 sons and that really you were looking at what is available for them to have information and learn about these things. And it's part of what inspired you to write the books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it something that you think is impacting people of all ages, or do you think it's a bigger issue for younger people? Like, who do you think this is made for?
I think it's made for everybody, men and women. And I think it's also a very astute question. I think, and I think if I can be so bold, I think you're interested in the answers. I can see it in your eyes. You're very interested in these concepts. And I think they transcend gender and they transcend age. Younger men are having more problems because the rate at which information is transferring is much more difficult than it was when I was younger. And so for me, I had a great upbringing. I was blessed with a lot of gifts. I was talented. I was an athlete. I had a strong family. I had good education. And I tried so hard not to fail, and yet I failed. So how does that happen? I legitimately tried very hard. I took risks, started businesses. Well, I got caught in that same trap that I think a lot of older men do, and they just kind of skip by and not see a reason to change. And that may be. And so some people say, oh, that's not me. That's for young men. But if you're not, everybody can grow. Everybody can do better. Everyone can find a deeper level of happiness. I bet you the most successful men or women probably don't understand the difference between happiness as an emotion and happiness as a state of being. And I see, Scott Galloway, who I think very highly of, so I don't mean to say anything negative about him, but I just want to relay what he said about happiness. Oh, I get happy when I'm with my friends and happy when I have camaraderie and happy when, we go drinking. Well, if you need something external to be happy, you're not really happy.
Right.
So
I would agree with you on that.
And that's happiness as a emotion because your brain's releasing oxytocin and maybe dopamine or serotonin, whatever. But if you have nothing, and it's been scientifically proven, if you cut all the cords of hormonal release, the only state of being your brain would produce is the state of bliss. And so that's happiness as a state of being. And so even though older men who are successful are happy, they're happy because they have the money to keep affording another external event and they keep trading, whether it's fishing or boats or Miami or football games or basketball games or travel or whatever it is. And so I think the young men problem is more pervasive because they're younger, they're more impressionable, and there's more being thrown at them. And I equate this in the book to like old tactics, like Napoleonic standing in a row in war, and then a machine gun was invented. Well, they didn't modify military tactics for decades after the machine gun would literally just mow them down.
Right.
And finally they said, hey, I think technology has superseded tactics. We should change tactics. And I think that's where we are now is literally young men are getting mowed down. The definition of masculinity changes every 7 seconds with a swipe,
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
I saw advertising for cereal called Balls cereal. Grow some balls and eat our cereal because it has creatine in it. Be a man and buy the cereal. It's like masculinity is taking all kinds of forms and
right.
It's confusing. I'm sure you're confused of what masculinity actually is today.
Yes.
Or what it means.
Yeah, it is. It is confusing. And it's something that we can talk about this on a large scale, but you and I were talking before we started the recording, and it's showing up and manifesting in significant ways. If you look at the loneliness epidemic, that was disproportionately impacting males.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the last 3 years, females have started closing the gap. That's an issue. But even if you look at things like advanced education rates, suicide rates, homelessness rates,
mental health issues, drug abuse,
incarceration, alcoholism. Yes, it is. It's significant. And it's something that doesn't have just an easy switch to flip the switch and, oh, okay, that's fine. And frankly, there's even a lot of people that don't necessarily see that as a concern. So it's hard to know what to do.
Yeah, before I answer your question or comment on that, let me ask you a question. And I asked this question early in the book. How would you define masculinity? How would you define it?
It's a hard question. It's
Well, what are some
hard
traits? What are some
because,
traits that you would associate with it?
well, the ones that pop to mind, I do think masculinity is when a man that is living the life he wants to live, where you do see happiness, self-confidence, they're exuding an energy, usually, not saying that in a performative way,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
you have the feeling that a man is comfortable in his own skin, which is such an overused cliche, but, like, you can just tell that they have a feeling of contentment in who they are, and you feel as if they know who they are. So it's not necessarily just for me, this is just my opinion. It's not like, muscular strength or stoic
So
or
that is a
whatever,
feeling.
because it's a feeling and it can be that broad range. It can be Robert Smith from The Cure. It can be Ryan Halliday talking about his latest book, right? So they don't, it's not, I don't think that every male has to embody the same traits, but having a comfort level and knowing what makes them themselves, and for the most part feeling comfortable with that, and then interacting and sharing that with the world either through relationships or through what they contribute in their career or
Yeah.
what they do in their life.
Okay, so let me ask you, and I think it's a great answer. How many people do you think, and especially maybe men in their 20s, have that same answer? And how many know how to get there, do you think?
Not many.
Yeah. I don't think many people would define it the way you have just defined it. I think that's a more modern and a new emerging definition. Certainly there's a lot of what you said that I believe in and I want to help, but I don't think a lot of people understand that to know how to get that. And I don't think a lot of people believe that. And I think if someone's successful with money or success in other aspects, don't really see a need to change or work on that embodiment of inner sovereignty. And I think that inner sovereignty, which is confidence, which is emotional stability, which is emotional depth, all those things kind of get wrapped up in sovereignty, the ability to be vulnerable and to share emotions. That's not the thing that people really understand how to get to. And so they just say, yeah, I'm doing fine. Like I'm making money and I'm going on trips
Right.
and so why
Or I'm fulfilling my obligations.
right.
I see
And
that a lot with a lot of
and
women
this is
too, but a lot of men.
and this is where it kind of goes off the rails. This is where the alpha piece comes in. Hey, that guy's winning because he looks really confident. I'm gonna try to be confident. I'm gonna color some peacock feathers in. I'm gonna look confident. I'm gonna portray this emotional depth, even if I gotta pretend it. Like that is where the energy is different, and someone attuned can tell. And I think part of this, and I'm by no means, and I do want to get to your loneliness question. I think it's a very important one. I no means want to blame women with this statement because it's not women's fault. But there are women that do and are attracted to alphas, and that's
Yes,
biological, and that's completely okay. And
that's
so
right.
some men are like, okay, I'm a beta, which basically means follower. You're just not the lead, and beta's fine. Her mentality is a survival mechanism, so there's nothing wrong with staying in the herd, right? And that's still back to this mammalian aspect. But these betas look and say, that guy's pretending to be a big guy. I saw him color the feathers in. So
Right.
so maybe I should do that too, right? Because that guy's big and built, but he's not that smart and he doesn't drive a fancy car. Okay, I'm gonna get a fancy car and I'm gonna be
Mhm.
different than him, but still I can color some feathers in and that might work with this girl. And so that programming kind of perpetuates itself. And I'll tell you, everything to be what you just described and everything to be an omega is really courageous because you're basically just throwing the whole process out the window and you're saying, I'm not going to play the mammal game. The mammal game's out. I'm going to be sovereign and me and authentic. And if some woman wants the alpha, then that's not the woman for me. And I'm going to sit tight and be with the kind of person that values authenticity, confidence, sovereignty, self-mastery, vulnerability, awareness, all these things. And I think that's where you have to get away from I vanilla and steer your own path. And I think that kind of really leads into loneliness if you want to respond or have you roll into loneliness. 'Cause I could talk for hours, by the way. You meant to stop me.
No, I would love to hear your thoughts
Okay.
on how that whole loneliness piece ties in with this.
And then you mentioned women too. So loneliness, from what I understand, and I'm sure people have different theories on this, it's not that you're lonely in terms of you can be in an unhappy marriage and be lonely. You could have camaraderie and be lonely. You can be living with someone and lonely. And I think the definition of loneliness is that you're alone in the ability to share your deepest feelings. And that loneliness can be one, your own fear of vulnerability that's
Mhm.
blocking you to share your feelings, and now you're alone with those feelings. It also could be blame or shame, which prevents you from saying, hey, I can't quite get it out because I'm very shameful, which is a very high level of judgment and guilt internalized. It's like internalized guilt. And you might not just have anybody that's created a safe space for you to release these emotions because you're afraid of being vulnerable, right? And it's that
Right.
fear that becomes that blockage of true emotional depth and companionship. And there's a very good possibility that if you do share, it may fall on deaf ears. So you might be alone. There are always steps to this process. And if you're lonely, I can tell you that you really don't need anybody else to be not lonely. As Wayne Dyer said, if you love the person you're alone with, you're not alone,
That's right.
but that takes a little bit longer to get there. That's kind of like, the butterfly, and we're kind of still in the caterpillar. Like, let's move and start wrapping a cocoon. And that may look like finding a safe environment, taking some risk emotionally, but they're baby step risks in terms of being vulnerable. But maybe it's not the, hey, I did this and this is where I really am quite yet, but maybe it's a little bit of difficulty and kind of build up to it. We don't need to jump off the high dive in the first dive. Maybe we just jump off the edge of the pool. And I think, try to be and find an environment that's safe. I think the reason why women loneliness is increasing is back to the mammalian thing. Men and women are here to procreate. And so the
Right.
opposite sex has a very powerful potency against our abilities to look vulnerable. It's back to that DNA thing. We want to be less vulnerable in front of women as a man. For a woman, they want to be less vulnerable in front of a man. Now, men are competitive with other men, so they want to be less vulnerable to men as well. So men in general have a biological component that makes it much, much more difficult to be vulnerable to anybody. But you're going to have to find an environment, first of all, and usually for a man, find a woman. My middle son, I'm trying to have him meet more women. He's very shy. He holds his cards and his emotions very close. So look, you may not have men to share these feelings with. Let's try to find someone as a woman you can be friends with. Let's start with friends. Let's find someone you can be safe with and share some of your deeper feelings with that will accept them more easily than, another man. It's less likely that that's going to happen with. So I hope that answers your question about loneliness, but it is a problem and it is getting worse.
And it's funny to me, and I have no idea how related these are, but if I was a social scientist, I would be looking into this. It's funny to me that this loneliness epidemic, which I do think was accelerated by the pandemic,
Yep.
but how it's emerging as social media becomes more pervasive and more, talk
Well,
about
yeah.
peacocking.
The ultimate peacock, TikTok, right? No, definitely. Yeah, I imagine COVID didn't help, and TikTok and
Right.
social media, Instagram doesn't help either. Interaction without emotional depth, and it becomes easy to interact and have camaraderie at a shallow level. And so I guess, lots of shallow water makes deep water. Yeah, not really, but it kind of looks that way. I'm walking around in a lot of water, but it's not very deep. So
Hmm.
it's a substitute. And again, I'm going to go back to what I've been saying. If you want your life to be better, if you want your life to have more success in wealth, because I think human connection is never more successful than in business. Okay. To be able to be honest and open and driven and have passion towards a goal, which is about business, right? If you want to control your own life in that or love, right? You're going to have to kind of go on your own. You're going to have to kind of break some norms. All of us are different. We've all been programmed differently. You know that for certain kids who moved around a lot, have lower levels of success in education and life because they moved around a lot, because the brain has to readjust its survival techniques, new environment to new environment. And so if you really want to be successful, you have to accept your own uniqueness. That's back to vulnerability, and you accept it, back to acceptance, awareness, how it interacts with the world, and then your own sovereignty to drive your choices that are best for you. And this is hard, and this takes courage. And I think a lot of practice, and I'm speaking from experience, having climbed this mountain and tumbled all the way down the hill. So it can be done.
When you say you tumbled all the way down the hill, your choice of career stayed constant, did it not?
And not exactly,
No?
going from commercial general engineering to luxury home building was like being a surgeon and becoming a pediatrician. It was a very different,
Okay.
it's
That's
very,
right.
very
So it
different.
was like it was under the same large umbrella, but dramatically different.
Right. I lost everything.
Mhm.
My ex-wife and I owned the business at the time. And I said, hey, I'll buy your half. And it's not for sale. I said, well, buy my half. I'm not buying. Well, I'm not staying married. So then shut it down. 130 employees, $40 million a year in revenue. Bye. Just shut it down. And everyone who owed money sued, and everyone who owed us money wouldn't pay. And it became a series of lawsuits. And Our primary residence secured the debt for the business. So we lost our house, pretty much lost everything. So when I say tumbled all the way down, I had health problems. My
Yeah.
marriage drove a wedge between me and my family. My best friend had died a couple years earlier that I never really reconciled, like my only real deep soulmate kind of level friend. Happy marriage, 3 kids, a lot of pressure. My health, I was supposed to have back surgery. And so all these things kind of lined up in the perfect storm. And then having to fight lawsuits and I couldn't get a new job while I got rid of this old company. So then I got a job and I was making, $500,000 a year. This business, $65 an hour in a job, a little bit of a change, a little bit of
A little bit.
adjustment. So, and I, looking back, I can tell you that no part of me regrets any of that pain or any of that transition, only because I came out having so much more wisdom and knowledge that I really applied to my life. So now my business is, I have an 8-figure business. I started in 2022, figure construction business. And I apply all my principles to business now. There's no shortcuts. There's no lack of authenticity. It's 100% objective morality all the time. There's no situational ethics. It just is what it is. And we're following this path no matter what.
Well, I think it's remarkable. So you really truly did lose everything. On a historical note, you lost everything a couple years after the big tidal wave of so
Yeah.
many people losing everything. Was that a shock to your system? Was it a delayed response to what happened with the recession? Or was it, like you said, just that perfect storm aligning in your own world?
Well, I think it was just kind of evidence to the path that I chose. And I want to be really clear about the path that I chose. It was healing, not coping. Coping looks like, hey, I'm going to go work out because I'm sad, or I'm going to go drink because I'm sad. I'm going to have buddies because I'm sad, or I'm not happy, so I'm going to go play golf. That's coping. Healing was, I'm going to remove the underlying cause of stress. I'm going to remove the underlying blockages to internal happiness. I'm going to remove the underlying causes of identity and performative anxiety and all that kind of stuff. And so the path was accuracy, honesty, healing at any cost. And so I began to value those traits over money, success, and survival. And a lot of people say, oh, I have to have a job. So did I. Like I
Right.
had a $65 an hour job. That didn't mean I'm going to have it forever. It meant this is where I am. This is my train that I'm on, but I'm going to work on getting on that train track at the same time. This train's going this direction. My destiny's going that direction. So let's work myself out of this without just jumping and falling and getting tossed around. But the path was still the same. It was an endless pursuit of learning wisdom that comes from 3,000-year-old texts, comes from 100-year-old books, comes from
Right.
50-year-old books, comes from modern thought leaders, comes from quantum physics, comes from modern day science, comes from Hungarian psychology, comes from Nietzsche, comes from Hawkins, comes from Campbell, comes from Lipton, comes from you
Right.
name it. It was just all of this collection of information, and that was my path.
I have a couple of quick questions. So when you were working the $65 an hour job, did you show up and give your best? And were you just your best in that role? Was that part of the healing?
Yes, and I was teaching
Yes.
my son this, who's like, college is tough and this class is dumb. And I said, look, those who love to walk will walk longer and farther than those who walk to a destination. So when you're in a class that's unrewarding, you're looking for a destination, you're looking for a prize, you're looking for something to give you satisfaction of that walk. But you're not walking because you love the walk. You chose school, you chose this path, love the walk, learn to love
Right.
the walk. Look, I'm not saying that it has to be the best class in the world, but you're mainly upset because you're not getting the reward that you hope for your walk. You're walking to a lake and there's no lake. So you're upset about the walk. Life becomes the walk. And so for me, the behavior was do what's in front of me the best that I can for my own love of the walk, not because of the prize. And I walked that walk for 3 years. I never once questioned it. I did the best I could no matter what it required. And I do it today. And the difference was I began to use awareness and see opportunities to change and start my own business. And it wasn't like, I'm going to go make more money and get back on my horse. It was just kind of happened organically. And I used intuition and I pulled intuition in and I had a healthy dose of fear in terms of respect, not fear in terms of run away. It was like, wait a minute, just don't want to jump into this. Is this intuition or is this not? I want to respect how confusing that could be. And that's kind of how I have this new life, is things came to me and they unfolded in a natural, cautious, logical, reasonable, intuitive, unreactive, unemotive state. I think that answers your question.
Yes, you did. Next question. I'm sure I'm not the only one dying to know. Did you have the back surgery?
I did not. I'll never forget
Okay.
that. Okay, so I had back surgery scheduled for February 29th, 2016. Had slipped a disc in college playing football, and I kind of healed from it in college in 1990-ish. And then it came back in 2015. And I got the epidural. It was a cortical steroid shot on my spine. Had another MRI, two slip discs, and the doctor has scheduled a double lunectomy and a double, I don't know the name, lunectomy. They're going to chip the gap where my nerves travel through my vertebrae, cut the disc, and shut it up. And so I started meditating, and I started trying to heal so I could get on my feet after the surgery.
Mhm.
And so the shot wore off, and I couldn't, I mean, I was literally, I couldn't walk. Like I was crawling to my closet in the morning to kind of like move my spine to stand. I couldn't even stand to get dressed. And so the shot helped me function and live. And then the shot wore off, and I said, "Hey doc, the shot's wearing off." And he's like, "Well, let's get you another shot. You can do 2 of these shots a year. They're very dangerous and unhealthy. You can do 2 a year. We'll get you one more shot before the surgery." So I said, "Okay." Got the shot, and then I started researching therapy, get on my feet again after the surgery. So 3 weeks go by. I said, "Hey doc, what's the time frame on this shot?" He says, "Well, it peaks at 3 weeks, it goes downhill." And I said, "Hey, I think I'm okay enough to not have surgery." He said, "Oh, no, no, you can't heal this. You can't heal this." Surgery set up, insurance approved it, got an operating room going. And I said, "Well, I think I might be okay. If it hurts this bad, I can live with this." So I got a second opinion. The doc's like, "You can't heal this. I saw your MRI. You can't heal this." And I said, "Okay, but I can always get it later." And they both said yes. So I postponed it. I lost 50 pounds,
Mhm.
did the exercises, did the work. And that was 2016. I never had the surgery. And I ski and I backpack and I do squats and I run and I lift and I do everything. And I'm healed.
It's amazing. When you say you lost 50, because you had mentioned during the time in your life where you were not being your authentic self, where you were, right?
A
You
slave to the
were
world. Yes, yes.
Yes, you did mention that you gained weight. Tell us a little bit about, like, once you started, and I'm not oversimplifying anything, but did you find that it was easier to lose it when you started living more in that authentic lane?
Well, yes, definitely. Because, from a biological perspective, being unhappy and having stress creates a lot of cortisol. And cortisol is a switch that says store sugar for fat. We need
Right.
energy for the future. This bean is under attack. Your brain can't tell the difference if your cortisol is from a famine or from just being unhappy. And I think, what I learned and I wrote about in my first book is that happiness isn't I'm happy or not happy. Not to release cortisol means that I don't have any stress. I mean, any level of stress becomes cortisol release. Worrying about rent, worrying about a job, worrying about being single, worrying about how I look in jeans, worrying about what trip I'm going to go on, worrying about what someone thinks, worrying about what my mom thinks, worrying about how I'm going to be accepted, worrying about if I upset somebody living my own life. Those are all things that release cortisol. And so I began to really focus on all of the things I learned and just said, I'm not going to ever have stress. And if that means, it doesn't mean you don't care about people, because you do.
Right.
It means you're not stressed about caring about people. It means I accept things for what they are and don't try to fight them, like the weather. Like, why would I get mad about the weather? Why would I get mad that someone's sad? You're sad. I'm so sorry you're sad. How can I help you? I hurt you. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I don't want you to be hurt, but it wasn't my intention. So how can I help you? It's having the accountability of what you did. The accountability means you throw compassion at it and help at it, not guilt and not cortisol. So weight kind of dropped off me. I mean, I did stop eating
Mhm.
gluten and I did stop eating poison, and I ate as much as I wanted of anything that wasn't poisonous. So sugar, I didn't eat sugar. I wouldn't eat breads and pastas. It was fruits, steaks, meats, beef jerkies, cheese, vegetables, and a lot of it, as much as I wanted. And just raw happiness and meditation. The meditation helped clear my mind and helped me get rid of all of the bad thoughts, evil thoughts, dirty thoughts, harmful thoughts. And the weight just kind of flew off me. And walked
Yeah.
a lot of walking.
Well, I think that's remarkable. And I'm not surprised. You're not the first person I've heard that from. And I went through a similar situation,
Yeah.
with a career with a certain company. And just once I made that choice to leave, similar to what you're saying, it's like my body started to respond.
Yeah.
And I also chose a similar path of an awful lot of what you listed of eating and not eating. But it is interesting. I will tell you, I used to hear that, oh, cortisol will make you gain weight and stress on, and I will tell you, I didn't really believe it until
So
I
you did?
experienced it myself. Yeah,
Uh,
then I was like, "Oh, all of that was True.
What happened to you to change? What was a big change for you, for
I
your
left,
cortisol
so I
release?
left a company where I thought that I was gonna retire out of this company. I had been there, I was coming up on my 10th anniversary, a very high performer,
Yeah. Stress,
and
performance, yeah.
the last 3 years I was there, the way I'll describe it is just there was a drift in the main core values of the company and for me as an individual, and neither were wrong or bad. They just became different. And so I became remarkably stressed. And then I was trying to manage it. I was trying to say,
Yeah.
like, I can silo myself and I'll isolate and I'll just look this way. I was deluding myself, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you learned that you can still perform and not have stress? Have you learned that? Or
Yes.
do you, okay. And how would you describe
Yes.
that lesson?
I hadn't thought of it in that manner. I had thought of it in the manner of, I don't have to be stressed out and anxious every day. So I
Yeah.
felt better, and I knew that when I feel better, just as a baseline, that I can perform at a high level.
So I would say the way I would equate it is stress is a choice. And
Yes,
people like they don't believe that, and you do because you lived it. I
I do.
think the way to have performance and not have stress is that number one, you love to walk. We usually get stressed because we think we're not going to get to the lake. The hike becomes stressful because we're basing it on a reward. So if you just love to walk, there are no rewards. Doesn't really matter.
Right.
You're doing it for the love of it. And this honestly goes back to the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu text. It's one of the
Mhm.
beginnings of Hinduism. In that, if you love the walk and you don't do things for gain, the dynamic changes. And it's a choice because you say to yourself, if I don't perform this walk well, my job, I'm not going to get the reward promise. And it's a choice to believe that that discontinuity between the effort and the gain is bad. That is stress, is
Right.
the
Right.
belief that it's bad. If I put this much effort in and get this kind of reward, and by the way, it's looking like I may lose this reward. Like I'm going to sell this house, but I kind of want this commission. I'm not going to get this. And I'm not sure I'm not going to be able to buy the trip I wanted. I'm going to be short for this vacation. The belief is that it's bad. That shortfall is bad. And your brain automatically goes to that. And then you believe it. We believe everything we think. That's the biggest mistake. Everyone always believes everything we think.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But it's funny because while we're talking, it's reminding me of one of my other guests, Panache Desai, who wrote You Are Enough.
Yeah.
And I just was thinking about when you were talking about meditating, and at some point, whether you were aware or not, you chose that you were going to heal your back without the surgery,
Yeah.
right? Like you realize, so when you were talking about that, it made me think about it. And even when I was just sharing it with you, yeah, when you can reach a point where you know that you are enough as you are, that I think helps
Yeah. And that's,
alleviate that perception and definition of stress in a massive way.
and I put that in the book, Alpha Star early, that one of the plays in the playbook of the Omegas is life is enough. And I pulled that a little bit from Viktor Frankl, the meaning of life is that life has meaning.
Yes,
And
yes.
so I think what I want to say about that is people get really confused about purpose. I have to have purpose. And that's a very true statement. And that's very colloquial and it's very cultural right now. And they go, well, purpose has to be something benevolent, like I'm a philanthropist or my work is
Right.
going to help others. I haven't quite found my purpose yet. So I'm not going to live life until I find my purpose. Well, I don't think it's supposed to work that way. And it's not. The purpose of life is that life has purpose. And people think if they can't find purpose, then they don't have life. And so they are always assigning life with a behavior or a vocation or an activity when just being alive is enough. If
Right.
you attach that the walk is life and that life is enough, just to be alive is enough. I have enough by being alive. Viktor Frankl, he was in Auschwitz or he was in a prison camp, literally was starved. And you see all the videos of people in these camps, naked and diseased and frozen and beaten. And he had an amazing life after that. And people always think if I lose now, I lose forever. Like the finish line is the second you're a loser, that's the end of life. I'm a loser forever. And so Viktor Frankl is someone that really teaches us that life is enough. And that if you have that faith and that hope and you believe that life is enough as your purpose, and you begin to walk that walk, that I'm walking life, and you believe it's enough. I just cannot stress enough from my experiences and many, if not most of the things I read endlessly, all say the same thing. Life is enough and all of it will come to you. And that's just hard for an animal to believe,
Yes.
right? We're
Yes.
animals. And that's where it makes it difficult is that becomes a barrier is I'm a squirrel and I got to put more nuts.
Well,
It's like
Dave,
Rockefeller said,
if
how many millions is enough? Just one more, right?
yeah, that's right, just one more.
Yeah.
Dave, if alphas die early, what is the alternative?
The
What
omega
if there's an
path.
alpha and we don't? So
Look, well, there's sigma. People want to be sigmas now because it's like I want to be better than alphas. Let's make a new archetype to sigma. It's like the alpha who wants to be more than alphas. Let's make a new, and there's nothing wrong with any archetype. And these aren't just, culturally or socially studied behaviors that they associate. So I'm not saying everyone who's an alpha falls into these behaviors, but
right,
usually if you have to say you're an alpha, you're not. And if you have to
right.
say you're a sigma, you're not. If you have to say you're anything, then you're trying to portray peacock feathers and you're not focusing on the bird. And the omega path is about, and I use Odysseus a little bit because I talk a lot about Joseph Campbell, if you're familiar with him,
Yes.
the hero's journey. And I think no one exemplifies the hero's journey as much as Odysseus, who basically lived the life of war, bravado, and spoils of war, and the consummate alpha, who got stripped of everything, and he just wanted to get back to what was authentic and real for him. And he had to forgo all those things, and he had to go through all those trials to get there. That's the hero's journey, and I don't think there's anyone hero's journey that has more apparent in today's time than Odysseus. And so
Hmm.
the omega path is about that transition from performance to self-awareness, from dominance to submission, not submission like I quit, but submission in terms of self-sovereignty. I don't need to compete with the world. I'm in myself, in my own space. And I think the alternative is to be less like an animal and more like a spirit. Nietzsche talks about this as his Übermensch. He has a book that he wrote about the
Yes.
Übermensch. So the omega man is Übermensch. It's the Superman. It's the man with morals without God. Not the need for God, but still have morals. And I think
Right.
this isn't new. I didn't invent this. This has been around for a long time.
However, you're doing what you can do
Yeah.
to spread the message.
Yes. And help and share what I know. And I was talking to my son again, who is having his own struggles. And I said, look, I'm here not to teach you things. I'm not here to support you. I'm here to show you it's possible. And that's what truly a teacher is. Say, look, it is possible to live and embody these things that have been around for thousands of years and be successful. And the more people that share their stories in terms of, and I think your stories as well, transcending your job, you thought was a need for this job, to transition to saying, I don't need this job. Those are all
Right.
examples of how you can take risks and survive. And the more
Right.
people that share these stories, they give more and more evidence to the other animals to start evolving and taking the feathers off and going that path.
Well, I think that it's fascinating. How does this show up in what you currently do with custom building luxury homes? So I just want to tie this into your actual entrepreneurship and career today.
Yeah, that's a great question. I use AI, which is in a funny way. I uploaded my book and I said, look, every email I write, I want it in the mega style, which is no fear, no fear of the outcome, straight shooter, no performance, no bravado, no affect, but for caring and kindness and giving while still delivering the right message. And so I do have it help me with word choices that sometimes evade me. But my desire is to be incredibly honest. And I don't mean honest, subjectively honest, but I mean act and behave in the ways I want. And so that looks like, for me, for example, someone asked me to bid a $10 million luxury, $10 million construction valuation. So maybe it's a $17 million, $20 million house when completed, land costs and everything. And the customer profile isn't exactly the profile that I think would keep me out of trouble in construction. And high net worth people can be very demanding. And I don't mean in a negative way, and that's okay.
Right.
But as a contractor, there's lots of variables you have to manage. And somebody that views me like a building partner rather than a building vendor is a higher level of success of the project. And I don't want to get involved in anything. It's like telling your surgeon how to do surgery. I'm coming in for this appendix removal. Can you make sure you do it this way? And I have clients that are telling me how to build their project. And so for me, I'd rather shrink and walk away from gain. So it's morality over money. And I stick to my morality and I don't let money affect rationalizing and shaving the edges off of this square peg to fit in a round hole. If it's square, it's square. If it's not going to fit, not going to fit, walk away. I'll adjust. The company's smaller. I'm not going to go jeopardize and be swept away with the fantasy of money of a $10 million job that I know doesn't fit my profile. Now, we all take risks. And those aren't risks I take anymore because usually they end up poorly. There's always exceptions, but in general, if it looks bad, it probably is going to be bad, so I stay away.
Right.
And that's discipline, and it's only discipline in the sense that I've found success in honoring that objective morality, period. And that's kind of how it shows up. Also, delivering bad news. A lot of people don't want to deliver bad news. Hey, windows are late. They're going to be 3 months late. It's the way it is. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? What can I do to help you? It is what it is. that I can control. There's tariffs, there's a war, it is. And a lot of people obfuscate and they curate and they wordsmith
Right.
and
Right.
boom, just say it how it is. And people really appreciate our directness. And some might get offended by it, and that's okay. They're just not going to be future clients. But we honor a code. All of our workers here kind of honor that code. And if they don't, they kind of weed themselves out. So day to day, it shows up in everything.
And by extension, you're feeling more in alignment with your own self, or
Yeah.
you're living your authentic self.
And life's easy. It's
Yeah.
remarkably easy. Now, I may not be as big as my competitors, and that's okay. I have a great life. This is what the universe has decided to give me. This is the reward of my plow, of my farm. But I'm here to be a farmer, not push the number of fruit that I can sell and like color an orange, a more brighter orange to sell it for a higher price. It's just is what it is. Like I love to farm, love to walk, and that's what it is. And life's incredibly easy for me for that reason.
So CQ construction
Yeah.
is where you're manifesting that.
Yep. And
And
living
it's
that.
just, you're living it. Yeah. You're living it.
Yeah.
Well, I
I've been
want to
so,
thank
I mean,
you
I am
so
grateful.
much.
I am so grateful too, because I do feel lucky, and I don't mean luck like the luck of a leprechaun, but I mean, I am grateful for the types of clients that have found me and I found them and that we've matched. And I really hold that dearly.
It's remarkable.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the whole tying back a minute to earlier part of the conversation around energy, like energy will attract like energy. So by you living authentically and having your own boundaries and expectations of yourself and your clients in your business, you're going to attract more
Yeah.
clients that are going to. I'm not saying you guys have to agree on every single thing or be like identical twins, but it is compatible and sympathetic, like they will work together
Yeah.
very well.
But also, I think for like boots on the ground kind of advice, there are things that do look like they match. And that's where you have to really test your own values and your own principles. Ray Dalio is a perfect example of someone that holds to his principles, wrote a book called Principles, as well as someone like Warren Buffett is not going to get swept away by the deal. Another great example. So for me, if I know something deep down in the back of my head is not a match, tell myself, if I take this and try to rationalize that it's close enough, it might be too much of a distraction to get the next thing around the corner that is a perfect match.
That's
So
right.
don't make those mistakes. And they do challenge me. And I think that's part of what business does, is it challenges your acumen. And I think that really successful businessmen find that happiness equals success, not that success equals happiness. And that happiness is authentically living contentment, following your principles that you know will make you successful, and not straying from that. And have faith and trust that living your knowledge, living your experience, and turning things away does not mean you're losing. It means you're waiting for the things that are right for you. And I firmly believe that. And some of my clients are on the top Forbes top 10 list in the world. We're talking, over $100 billion clients that I have in the work that we do. Most of our clients are on the $1 billion level of high net worth. And not that there's anything special makes them better. It just means it's a different level of demand and a different level of requirement that I'm fortunate to be around. And it works. I came from nothing to get this, to be in this company.
And you were not afraid to rebuild after losing everything.
I was loving the walk. There was no reward. It was just the next thing to do. It was just,
Right.
did it slowly. Opportunity came here. Let me vet it. Opportunity came there. Let me vet it. Maybe it's the right time. Don't jump in too fast. Do logic and reason. It's not going to make me happy. So don't jump into it for happiness. Don't jump in it for money. Assess it without reward. Assess it if I really love it. And I did. And that's why I think it is built on the stable base.
Do you think you have another book in you?
Absolutely. I love writing. I
Okay.
love helping. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I really had a lot of fun writing the second book, all the lessons I learned from the first book. And it was really fun to write. Yeah. Maybe dating. I think dating is probably the next one.
On that note, have you reimagined your key relationships?
I got remarried last year.
Excellent. All right.
I was single for maybe 3 years and had a very strict protocol, which I tell some of the younger guys at the company. Friends first. Don't waste any time if you can't be friends. Honestly, get to know them as a friend. Don't peacock. Don't talk about yourself. Use your time to get to know them. And if they want to get to know you, you can talk about you. But don't talk about you. Don't impress. Don't do anything but get to know them. Your efforts get to know them. And then if you think it could be a friendship and something where you can go emotionally deeper, then move it along. But if it shows signs that it can't, just move on. And the world will test you. And the only reason is that it's not chemistry. That'll come. It's not attraction. That'll come. It's not compatibility. That'll come. It's whether or not there's a true connection that you can have something deeper emotionally. And so I single for 3 years, met somebody, took it really slow, looked at all those metrics, dated for 6 years, 7 years. And then, again, asked her to marry me about a year ago. We got married last year.
It's fantastic.
She'd never been married before. And I said, look, I don't need to get married. I don't really care. This is a word for me, but if it's important to you and society thinks it's important, let's get married. And it was very romantic, and it was very, I did it 100%. And it was great.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Thank
So I
you.
just hope people are inspired, and I believe they are. Really, that was, as you said, tumbling all the way down the hill in
Yeah.
all areas. Sounds like you hung on and did your best in terms of being a father.
Yeah.
And, and have that. And now you've rebuilt your career and your key relationships, and
Yeah.
you're
And
married
my
now.
health. And most importantly, my health.
Your health. I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Health as
Well,
well.
thank you so much. Maybe your next book can be Redefining Femininity. You'll have to come back again, and we can
Oh, I'd love to. No, I'll
have
send you a
the
book.
opposite.
I'll make sure to send you a book. Several women have read it and absolutely love it. To understand men, same principles. I do have women examples, but there's men's statistics, but all of the plays, all of the basics, all the challenges are the same things women face, just in a different content. But it is all very, very helpful. And I think it's very enjoyable. A lot of people have really said how much they enjoy the book.
Well, I look forward to reading it. I want to thank you for being our guest
Oh, and
today.
thank you for
This
having a
has
great time.
been fascinating.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to reach out, learn more about CQ Construction, Dave's books, or just connect in general, all of Dave's contact information will be wherever you're consuming this podcast. So just go to the details section and you can connect. And Dave, I just want to thank you again. If you're listening to this episode, I hope you'll join us again. Leave your comments in the description and let us know your definition of masculinity. Dave, thank you.
Bridget, thank you. Honestly, what a great time. Fantastic questions. You clearly are been working very hard on this, and it's such a joy to have someone be so interested and so interested in the answers. And it really makes me feel glad that humanity in general is on the same path. And thank you so much for reinforcing that for me.
Thank you. And thank you for being here.